July 6, 1415, Constance, Germany. A Czech priest named Jan Hus is led into the cathedral in chains. The sentence is read, heretic. His writings are ordered burned. He is stripped of his priestly vestments one by one, and then he is handed to the secular authorities, which in 1415 is a polite way of saying he is about to be set on fire. They take him to a field outside the city, chain him to a stake, pile the kindling to his chest, offer him one final chance to recant. He refuses, commends his soul to God as the flames are lit. Jan Hus burns alive, and in doing so he starts a war the Catholic Church will spend the next 15 years losing, repeatedly, humiliatingly, to peasants with farm wagons. To understand why Bohemia erupts the way it does, you need to understand who Hus was and what he represented. He is not some obscure theologian arguing about abstract doctrine. He is a national hero, a reformer who preaches in Czech rather than Latin so ordinary people can actually understand Scripture, who argues the Catholic Church is corrupt, that priests should live like Christ, not like princes, that the Bible matters more than papal decrees. The Church considers this dangerous. In 1414, Hus is summoned to the Council of Constance to answer for his views. Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund provides written safe conduct, a formal guarantee of protection. Hus travels to Constance trusting this promise. He is immediately arrested, imprisoned for months, interrogated repeatedly, told to recant or burn. He refuses to recant beliefs he holds to be true simply because powerful men are telling him to. So they burn him. Bohemia's response is immediate and absolute. This is not how a distant heretic dies, this is how a national hero is murdered. Czech nobles send a formal letter of protest to the Council of Constance, signed by 452 lords. They declare the condemnation of Hus a condemnation of Bohemia itself. They establish their own church, they refuse papal authority, and they develop their own religious practices, most provocatively, giving communion in both bread and wine to ordinary lay people, not just clergy. The chalice becomes the symbol of the Hussite movement, a direct challenge to Rome. Pope Martin V calls a crusade against the Hussites in 1420, the first of 5, all of which will fail. The man most responsible for those failures is Jan Žižka, a veteran warrior, perhaps 60 years old, who loses his remaining eye early in the Hussite wars and continues commanding armies in complete darkness for the rest of his life, totally blind, undefeated. Žižka's great innovation is the war wagon, large reinforced farm wagons chained together in a circle to form an instant mobile fortress. Crossbowmen and early handgunners fire from the gaps between wagons. Cavalry charges, which are the standard military tactic of every army the Crusaders send, break apart against the wagon circle like water against stone. When the attackers are exhausted and disorganized, the Hussites burst out from behind the wagons with flails and polearms and destroy them. It sounds simple. It works every single time. The First Crusade, 1420. Emperor Sigismund, the same man who promised Hus safe conduct and watched him burn, personally leads a massive force into Bohemia, determined to crush the heresy and secure his claim to the Bohemian throne. The Hussites meet them at Vitkov Hill outside Prague. Žižka positions his war wagons on high ground. The Crusaders attack uphill into withering crossbow fire. They break and retreat, having accomplished nothing except proving the wagons work. The Second Crusade, 1421. Another German army invades. Defeated at Kutna Hora, the Crusaders flee in disorder, some chroniclers describing the retreat as more chaotic than the battle itself. The Third Crusade, 1422. The Crusader army marches to the Bohemian border, receives reports about what happened to the first two armies, and turns around without fighting. They do not even engage. They hear about the war wagons and go home. 3 Crusades, 3 failures. One of them did not even try. Žižka dies in 1424, not in battle but from plague during a military campaign. He asks that his skin be made into a war drum so he can continue leading his men after death. Whether this actually happened is disputed. What is not disputed is that the Hussite armies continue winning without him, under a new commander named Prokop the Great, because the tactics Žižka built are bigger than any one man. The Fourth Crusade, 1427. Defeated at the Battle of Tashov. By now, the reputation of the Hussite forces alone is doing half the work. Crusader armies know they are marching toward probable defeat against people who have beaten every army sent against them. The morale problem is structural. You cannot inspire men to charge war wagons that have already destroyed 3 crusades. The 5th Crusade, 1431, is the one that makes the other 4 look dignified. Emperor Sigismund assembles a force allegedly numbering 100,000 men. Cardinals travel with the army. This is meant to be the overwhelming final blow. Too many soldiers, too much pressure, impossible to resist. They reach the town of Domazlice in August and begin their siege. Then the Hussite relief force arrives. Perhaps 6,000 men under Prokop the Great. And before a single arrow is fired, before the armies are even within range of each other, the Crusaders hear it. The Hussite battle hymn, Ktoś su Bożi bojownicy, ye who are warriors of God, echoing across the plain as the banners come into view. 100,000 men turn and run. They abandon their siege equipment. They abandon their supply wagons. They flee back toward Germany in complete disorder, routed by a song. The 5th Crusade collapses without a single engagement. It is arguably the most embarrassing military failure in the history of papal crusading. An army that outnumbered the enemy perhaps 15-1, undone entirely by reputation and a hymn. The Hussite wars do not end in triumph. They end in exhaustion and internal collapse. By the 1430s, the movement has fractured into 2 irreconcilable factions. The moderate Utraquists, who want a negotiated settlement with the Church, and the radical Taborites, who want complete separation and social revolution. The Catholic Church, having failed to defeat the Hussites militarily, tries something different: negotiation. The Council of Basel opens talks with Hussite representatives in 1432. Prolonged, difficult, grudging negotiations. The Church offers concessions it would never have considered before 5 crusades proved force was not working, communion in both bread and wine for lay people, preaching in Czech, limited reform. The moderate Hussites accept, the radical Taborites refuse and continue fighting, but now they are fighting other Hussites rather than crusaders. At the Battle of Lippany in 1434, the moderate Utraquists, allied with Catholic forces, defeat the Taborite radicals. Prokop the Great dies in the battle. The organized military resistance of the radical Hussite movement is finished. The Compacts of Basel are signed in 1436. The Church grants the Bohemians their key demands. The Crusades are over. Not because the Church won, because it gave up trying to win by force and settled for half of what it wanted rather than continuing to lose everything it sent. The legacy of the Hussite Crusades runs further than most people realize. A century later, a German theologian named Martin Luther reads about Jan Hus and recognizes something. He is not alone. Others have questioned papal authority before him. Others have argued scripture matters more than papal decree. Others have paid for it with their lives. And others, the Hussites, have proven that resistance to Rome is possible, that the Church is not invincible, that it can be defeated, forced to negotiate, made to concede. When Luther nails his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in 1517, he is standing on foundations the Hussites built. The Protestant Reformation, which permanently splits Christendom, begins with arguments the Bohemians were already making 100 years earlier. 5 crusades called by sitting popes with full papal authority, 5 failures. Defeated by a one-eyed general who commanded blind, by farmers who turned wagons into fortresses, by a battle hymn that routed 100,000 men before they could lift a sword. The Hussite Crusades are not a footnote. They are the moment the Church's military authority over Christian Europe begins to collapse. It never fully closes again. If you want more history that did not make it into the version you were taught, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.